Hey there, kids. It's not your dad, but your LoreDad, here to talk to you about a timeline that's been nagging me for a while. You see, the Napoleon movie's out today, and I really want to go watch it, but my actual real-life, living, breathing 4-month-old daughter is too young to go, and it didn't feel right leaving my family behind to go watch a movie. I need to sit on the sidelines and wait for it to come out on a streaming platform before I can enjoy the cinematic experience with my family. What I've been doing instead is thinking of a timeline where Napoleon was more successful, stayed in power, and achieved his ambitions of subjugating Europe. And while most of them haven't been working out, I think I have one that could work. In order to give Napoleon's France the best chance they could to subjugate Europe, we will not be doing a point of divergence like the Battle of Waterloo. Instead, we're going to go back, before Napoleon's rise to emperorship. For this scenario to work, we're going to need to go back 90 years before the Revolution, during the War of Spanish Succession. Back when Spain was ruled by the Habsburgs, the last Habsburg king was completely inept due to centuries of Habsburg inbreeding, and did not produce an heir. After the king died, his will has stated that his royal titles are to be given to Philip of Anjou, grandson of the French king. The rest of Europe, who were against France, loathed this prospect, as with no outside intervention, the French would grow far too powerful. Thus, the War of Spanish Succession began as soon as the Spanish king had died. During this era of warfare, armies were concentrated into extremely large forces and fought in decisive battles. Whenever this didn't succeed, the war would drag on for much longer. An example of this was our history's Battle of Blenheim. The French ally of Bavaria had, with the support of the French army, attempted to destroy the Austrian army and failed. The result was a cascade of nations joining the fight and eventually led to a compromise, where the Bourbon King of Spain would remain, but rescinded his claim to France, creating a separate house of Bourbons specifically for Spain. Here lies my point of divergence. The Battle of Blenheim is a decisive French victory. Austria is quickly knocked out of the war before the war can escalate, and the Hungarians are given independence. With the Austrians so quickly humiliated, the rest of the powers against France quickly bow out of the war. And while France and Spain wouldn't be ruled by the same monarch yet, the French and Spanish nobility would scheme to ensure that the thrones were united under one king. The consequence of this divergence is extremely significant. The territory that France had gained from the succession war was beyond Spain. It also granted France the remaining Spanish-controlled territory in the Benelux, Milan, and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. The already dominant French kingdom was now the uncontested hegemon of Europe. I wanted to quickly mention that I do think this outcome of France getting everything and having no significant consequences is a little far-fetched. And if the French were to win the War of Spanish Succession, the war would have been much more drawn out and had much more nuanced peace deal in this timeline. Possible History has a good video on this subject, and you can check it out in the card just above. This timeline is not one of a French victory in the Spanish War of Succession. It's a timeline where Napoleon would dominate Europe. So please bear with me as we continue exploring this timeline. After the French victory, most of the events that followed the War of Spanish Succession remained the same, but with a twist. Due to Bavaria's ascendancy, they managed to press their claim to the Austrian Habsburgs' lands after the ascension of Maria Theresa in 1740, becoming the new major power in the Holy Roman Empire, besides Prussia, who manages to seize Silesia, and partake in an alternate partition of Poland, where the Prussians gain more territory to their east, and the Russians gain more territory in the south. The 7 Years' War would still occur, but with a far different outcome. Instead of a French defeat in the colonies, they would succeed, creating a far different dynamic in the Americas. And when the United States of America revolt for independence against Great Britain, France would still support them, anything to weaken their rival and limit their colonial holdings. Now, 80 years after the victory at Blenheim, Europe looks something like this. It's clear to see that the Bourbons have been dominating the continent. While independent nations still remain, many have bound themselves together against Bourbon hegemony, while there are few states that collaborate with them. Regardless of their alignment, each nation of Europe was preparing for another bloody conflict. However, this conflict would manifest in a way far differently than anyone could have imagined, as it wouldn't be long before the French Revolution changed everything. Wait, I hear you say. Wouldn't the success of France in conquering Spain mean that the French Revolution wouldn't have happened? I say, why? The intrinsic problems inherent with monarchical societies had no precedent of being challenged before the French Revolution. So even if the French were able to gain a higher standard of living thanks to the... Whoa. That's a big empire. What? Oh, where was I? Right. Even with a higher standard of living, the wealth disparity between the classes of France would have still led to the French Revolution. It's easy to look at the failures of Louis XVI and accuse him of being the reason why the French monarchy fell. But the systemic problems which plagued the peasantry of France would still persist. In fact, it may even be exacerbated with the inclusion of Spain in the crown lands of the Bourbons. The Spanish nobility would not take their inclusion into the French realm lightly. It's plausible that the French nobility would need to offer substantial bribes to the Spanish nobility in exchange for loyalty to their French king. This capital would need to be acquired from their colonies or their peasants in the homeland. Either way, the prerequisites to cause such a revolution would still exist. What changes, however, is how the revolution and the revolutionary wars occur. The revolution would happen in Paris, just like our history. The Bastille is stormed, and the prisoners are set free. For the ease of lore development, let's have this happen on the same day as our history. In our history, the king, Louis XVI, attempted to escape to the Austrian Empire, but he was spotted while trying to escape. The reason he decided to go to the Austrian Archduchy is because they were married to a princess of Austria. While it's possible that the king of France and Spain in this timeline could have been married to the Bavarian dynasty and attempted to escape through the border regions there, I would say it's more plausible that they would instead flee to Madrid and organize a counter-revolutionary force there. With the arrival of the French monarchy in Madrid, the question remains, would the Spanish army be able to defeat the revolutionary one? No, they wouldn't. Instead, a subsequent Spanish Revolution would rise in solidarity with the French. After all, the hardships that the French nobility had put onto the peasantry in their kingdom had now been inflicted upon the Spaniards as well. Now, the Bourbons will need to evacuate once again, but instead of retreating to their allies in Europe, their only option would be to take the long trek to the colonial empire in America. Portugal would follow suit, as the Franco-Spanish revolutionary forces invade Portugal. Now, does this mean that we have a Franco-Spanish republic? Absolutely not. The Spanish revolutionaries would annex Portugal and proclaim an Iberian republic, a sister republic to the French Republic. Due to these divergences, I believe that the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars would go much better for the French. The diplomatically isolated Iberian Republic would be forced to be friends with France, whether it was a republic or an empire under Napoleon. And with Napoleon's southern flank completely secure, he would have a blank check to subjugate the rest of Europe. With all these factors in his favor, would he succeed? Would the Bourbons in exile, with the combined territories of the French and Spanish colonial empires, manage to reclaim their place in Europe? Or would they succumb to imitation revolutions in the rest of their empire in an alternate Latin American war for independence? How would they differ from our history with the French colonial empire in the mix? These questions have been nagging at me, but I want to get your thoughts. Are you interested in seeing me dive deeper into this timeline after Project Stresa? Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below, find my community post here, or visit me on my Discord. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you have a good day.